Going to your book a little bit, I'm gonna pick up, going back to that first thought. Standing up means voluntarily accepting the burden of being. Your nervous system responds in an entirely different manner when you face the demands of life voluntarily. You respond to a challenge instead of bracing for a catastrophe. You see the gold the dragon hoards instead of shrinking in terror from the all too real fact of the dragon. You step forward to take your place in the dominance hierarchy and occupy your territory, manifesting your willingness to defend, expand, and transform it. To stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open.
Right.
The reason I pulled that one out in particular is the feeling that you have as a soldier or as a military person. The feeling that you have going on an offensive operation where, let's say, you're a bad guy and I'm going to come and get you at night. Well, first of all, you don't know, and I'm sneaking up on you, and I have all this power, right? I feel good about it. I'm going to get you. The opposite of that is when I'm doing a convoy or I'm going on a patrol where now the bad guys are out there, they're waiting to attack me, and that is a defensive posture, and your attitude about that type of thing is bad. Now, we would train our guys that we made a specific point. With my guys, I would say, look, when you're on patrol, we're on offense. We are scanning. We are looking to get us to be standing up straight and to get the mentality of we want to do this and we're moving towards the target as opposed to we're being chased. That's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely, that's a big deal. Yeah, and that's what would you say? That's an extreme example of what's necessary under normal conditions in life. So one of the things that happens if you're treating someone who has a phobia, say like agoraphobia, so they become afraid of virtually everything. Maybe they're afraid of an elevator. It's one of many fears. And so you think, well, and they're afraid of an elevator because they've actually gone in elevators and had panic attacks. So it's weird because what you do to cure them is to get them to go in elevators. And you think, well, wait a second, that's actually what caused the problem. So how can getting them to do that again make it better? And the answer is because they've gone in elevators their whole life, right? And yet they still become terrified. So how can getting them to go in an elevator cure them? For a long time, people thought, well, you get them to relax while they were in the elevator, and the pairing of the relaxation with being in the elevator taught them to not be afraid. That was the first theory. But then people learned that no, you could just get them to go in the elevator without having them relax, and it also worked. And eventually psychologists sorted this out, and what they figured out was that voluntarily encountering something you're afraid of is not the same thing as running from it. Like, it's seriously not the same thing. So you say to the person, okay, you're afraid of the elevator. Can you go look at an elevator? And they usually say yes. And maybe they're so terrified because they're so far gone in their illness that they can't. You say, well, how about we look at a bunch of pictures of elevators? And it's like virtually everyone can do that. So we say, let's look at pictures of elevators till you're bored. That actually doesn't take very long because it's actually quite boring. So then the next thing would be, well, let's go. You have to have the person trust you. And so the rule is, look, we're going to do some things that are going to push you, like competition.
Right.
But you can stop whenever you want, and we're not going to push you any farther than is good for you. And I'll stop anytime you want. I often practice with my clients, like I taught one client a while back to not be afraid of needles. And he was afraid of needles. And I'll tell you what that meant. He had dental surgery with no anesthesia.
Oh.
Right. Okay, so that gives you some level of what it's like to be afraid. It's like, I'll do the dental surgery, but you're not putting that needle in there. It's really? Wow. It's like, I'm no needles. So I taught him how to not be afraid of needles, and it didn't take very long. But the first thing I did is I told him I was going to bring a needle into the office. And that was all I told him the first week is next week I'm going to bring a needle in here and I'm going to keep it sheathed. And it's going to be sitting on a shelf, and that's where I'm going to put it. And when you come in here, you can look at it. And if you want me to put it away, then I'll put it away. It's under your control. And then, so he was okay with that. So he came in, I said, there's the needle. I said, you want to look at it? He said, no. I said, but can you? It's like, I'll look at it. So he looked at it. And then he said, look, like, I'm going to pick up the needle. And now what you're going to do is you're going to tell me to put it down. And I'm going to put it down. So I picked it up. And he got nervous, like right away. And he said, will you put that down? I put it down right away. I said, we do that 10 times so that the bottom part of your nervous system actually knows that that's what's going to happen. Said, now, and then the next thing we'll do is we're going to practice you saying you've had enough and leaving the office. So I pick up the needle And he'd say, okay, so now you say you've had enough, I'm leaving. And so he said that, and then I'd let him leave. We did that like 10 times so that he knew that he could just say he'd had enough and leave. So that meant he didn't have to be a prey animal, right? So we were getting him out of that mode. And it didn't take very long until, well, then I could bring the needle close to him. And I say, make sure you watch it. You can't pretend it's not there, right? I'll bring it close to him and touch it, and touch him with the sheathed needle. So we did that a bunch. And then finally, I unsheathed it, and I'd bring it close, and he'd tolerate that or stop me. And then I'd touch him with that. And then the last part of it was that I put it under a piece of paper so he couldn't see it, and then I'd bring it close to him, right? Because that was the unknown, right? You don't know what the hell's going on underneath the piece of paper. But he got to the point where he could go and have a needle. It took him it was very brave of him to do this because, well, what had happened to him is he had a very bad experience with the childhood dentist who held him down.
I was about to say, where did this come from?
Oh yeah, 6 people held him down to give him a needle. It's like, that wasn't so good. It had some long-term consequences. But see what happened. So when you do that with people, you don't teach them to be less afraid. You teach them to be braver. That's different. And so like I had a client once, the doors opened on the elevator, and she looked in and she said, that's death. Like that's a tomb. And I thought, wow, that's an amazing response. And her idea was she'd go in there, her heart rate would accelerate, she'd have a heart attack, and she'd die. So as far as she was concerned, walking in there was death. Right? Okay, so for me it was an elevator, but for her it was death. It's like, okay, well, what do you do about your fear of death? Well, we're not getting rid of that. It's like, and you could die in the elevator. You actually could. Probably you won't, but people do die in elevators. And her idea was that, well, if anyone has ever died in an elevator in the history of mankind, that's a good reason for me not to be in the elevator. It's like, fair enough, And why aren't you terrified out of your skull all the time? Because while you're wandering around, you might have a heart attack. Like that will probably, in fact, happen to you at some point. So why aren't you terrified of that at every moment? Well, that's the mystery. Well, so you treat people. And you see, with that client, what I eventually did with her is we went and watched an embalming. She was terrified of death, like date seriously. Night. Yeah, date. yeah.
Good times.
Right, no kidding. But so you don't get less afraid. You get braver. That's better because there's plenty of things to be afraid of.
There's a great feeling in these overcoming these difficult things because life is never this just constant state of I'm at a 9 all day, and when I'm with my wife I hit 10, yay, and I stay like that. That's not real. What's real is like you saying that you went to this monastery and felt all this angst about meditating and being alone and not having your phone and not having the input, but then when it comes out of it, then you have this reward. So you push through this, and you had these uncomfortable feelings, and you came out of those uncomfortable feelings with this newfound appreciation for time and this respect for your own existence in your own space and carving out 3 hours for yourself a day. That's where it all comes from. It all comes from life lessons, and the lessons are learned through struggle. And I think that there's a lot of people out there that think somehow or another you're going to get to some place where you're living in silk sheets and you're getting your toes done while someone's dropping grapes into your mouth. I don't want that. I've never wanted that. That guy's not going to be happy. He's going to be bored. An hour into the grapes, you're going to get those fucking grapes away from me. Stop painting my toes. What am I doing in this bed? I got to do something. I'm not stimulated. The human organism, the animal that we are, needs constant stimulation because it evolved trying to find food and escape enemies and find shelter, escape nature, escape the elements, try to survive. And this is the great joy that you have in taking care of your children, that you can protect your children from the elements and the enemies and feed them. And it's also the great sadness that you see in losers. When I see a loser, I see some guy who's 43 years old, lives in his parents' basement, and he fucking hates the world. I'm like, that was a baby. Man, this is a baby that somebody just gave shitty nutrients to, whether it's nutrients in the forms of food or in the form of thoughts and ideas and examples, and this kid developed these horrible self-defeating patterns of behavior that have led them to this point where they're this middle-aged person with no future and no idea of how to get out of this rut and probably never will escape it and might just wind up sucking on a gun. You know, I mean, this is the world that we live in today. And I think part of that world is because we have been fed this line of horse shit that you're supposed to seek comfort. And I don't think you are. I think you're supposed to seek lessons, and you're supposed to seek difficult tasks and accomplishments. And through those things and through doing things that are hard to do, even if it's just a fucking 90-minute hot yoga class. I do a 90-minute yoga class, man. Those last 20 minutes, I do not want to be there, man. And I definitely don't want to give 100%. And I can cheat. I could kind of half-ass it. But if I don't and I get through it, when that time is up and the lady says namaste and everybody gets up, I'm like, fuck, man, I made it. You know, I lost 15 pounds. My fucking yoga mat is drenched to the point where I could literally wring it out and fill a jug up with water. But through that struggle, I will now have a better day. And I better fucking do it again tomorrow. Or do something else. Because if I just think, well, tomorrow I'm just going to coast and eat Twinkies and watch TV. Oh, hello, sadness, my old friend. Hello, depression. Because when you're not doing anything, you feel like shit. And that's just a part of being a human being. And we can pretend that we're something other than what we really are. And we can pretend, nah, me, man, I'm just cool, just chilling, doing nothing. Bullshit. You're a fucking human. You're a human being. You evolved from the fucking hundreds of thousands of years of hunters and gatherers and people that were struggling. Those human reward systems are carved deeply into your DNA. And if you don't respect that, if you don't respect the mechanism of happiness and fulfillment and what you really need to do in order to feel satisfied in life, camaraderie, love, family, friendship, struggle, testing yourself, learning, all those things are imperative. They're all a giant part of being a person.
I love it. That was amazing. And I'm thinking in my head, am I checking those boxes as you're talking? And am I living my life like that, you know? And yeah, I agree with you.
Sounds like you are.
I am. Yeah, no, I feel
and
like
we all waver, right? We all have days in and days out.
Absolutely.
But to be reinforced.
Yep. And I feel like, you know, as I'm listening to you talk about that, I'm literally going through like the last 10 years of my life, you know, and when I lived with David, when I went on the monastery, all these things, they're all about getting an edge and doing what you know, and I think it's like part of being human. And that stuff makes me feel the most alive too. Mm-hmm. You know, like that just makes me feel alive. Yeah.
You know, and also like little improvements over things. That's why doing difficult things is good, whether it's running. So like if you're running and you could run 2 miles and then one day you get it up to 3. It's like, fuck, I remember when I struggled with 2, and now I can do 4. Little improvements. You know, and you really see that in yoga class, and in particular for me because I'm not good at it. You know, so when I do a yoga class and I can hold a pose until like you're holding these poses for a minute. And if you could stand on one foot, grabbing your other foot and lifting it above your head and keep your arm out straight and your balance and your foot's on fire and your core is engaged. But if you can get to the point where they say stop, you feel like, wow, I didn't used to be able to do that. I used to be able to hold it for 10 seconds and then I would fall down. And then I'd have to start all over again and start from scratch. There's little improvements where you feel yourself getting a little better at something, whether it's jujitsu or anything else. Just little improvements, I think, are what life is all about. And I think also they're a tool to feed the mind. Because I really believe the mind needs these little lessons. The mind needs these little tasks. And if your brain doesn't get that, I think it atrophies and it gets depressed. And it's like I think that's half of what a lot of people's sadness is this lack of stimulation and reward, lack of these peaks and valleys. And this bullshit idea that we're constantly fed that you should be comfortable.